Geometry, this is 4.4. This is drawing conclusions number 1. And in this lesson, we're going to talk about 3 different things: the reflexive property, the third angle theorem, and the definition of midpoint. So this lesson is going to be really vocabulary heavy, so maybe not the most exciting thing ever, but really important for where we're going. So make sure that you're writing these things down and attempting to understand what it all means. So the first one we're going to talk about is the reflexive property. And what the reflexive property says is that if 2 triangles share a side, then that side is going to be congruent in both triangles. Okay, so if 2 triangles share a side, that side basically has to be the same in both triangles. So I have a diagram here that illustrates the reflexive property. So we have this blue triangle on the left and the red triangle on the right, and you can see that they share this side here. So this side HS is the exact same side. The triangles are kind of on top of each other and they share that side. What that tells us then is that that side is congruent in both triangles. So if we were to separate them apart, we could mark them as congruent on both. Okay, reflexive property looks like this in writing. We could say that side HS is congruent to side HS, which is kind of weird. Like obviously side HS is congruent to side HS. They're the same thing. But it comes in handy because that side HS is part of both triangles. So if I pull that apart again, this would be H and this would be S, if we just kind of pictured them as 2 separate triangles. Okay, so that's a reflexive property. Third angle theorem. Third angle theorem is another one that it's really pretty simple. It makes a lot of sense. It says that if 2 angles of one triangle are congruent to 2 angles of another, then the third angles are also congruent. Okay, so if you have 2 angles of one triangle, you have 2 angles of the other triangle, they're congruent, then that third one kind of by default also has to be congruent. So in the diagram here, we have just a triangle on the left, a triangle on the right. I didn't even label the corners of this one, but you can see that we have this red angle here. It's marked with 1 mark, and a red angle over here with 1 mark. They're congruent. And then we have the blue one with a little dash. Those are congruent to one another. So that tells us that basically by default, this third angle is congruent to this third angle. Okay. And then last one, this one's not necessarily new, but kind of new for us in this unit. The definition of midpoint. The midpoint of something creates 2 congruent segments. So a midpoint always creates 2 congruent segments. So here is a little diagram. We have a couple triangles here, and I'm telling you that M is the midpoint of segment RT. So what that tells us is that this midpoint here creates 2 congruent segments, one on the left and one on the right. Okay, therefore RM, side RM, is congruent to side MT because of the definition of midpoint. Okay, there is another thing on this diagram that you could mark. If you notice that we have a triangle on the left, a triangle on the right, and they both share this side here, I could add, I'll add another letter here. I'll call it, put an A up here. We could use the reflexive property there and say that side MA is congruent to side AM. And that'll happen sometimes in your diagrams. Once you get to your practice, you'll see that some of them have more than one thing that can be marked for one or more different reasons. All right, so here's our example. We're just going to do this one example here. There's 6 different questions with it, so definitely hit pause here and draw this in your notebook nice and neat. But what we're doing here is determining if each pair are congruent and then explaining why. And this is actually a little bit different than what your practice is going to look like, but I think that's okay. I think this will explain things well enough that you can complete the practice with no problem. So first one says, is side MH congruent to side TA? So I'm going to find those things. I'm going to find MH, I'm going to find TA, and I'm going to notice right away that they each have 1 tick mark. So you can say that yes, they are congruent. And then the reasoning is you can just say they're marked. Okay, and I'm just going to say 1 tick mark. just because these are our notes, and when you look back at them, you want to say, wait, what were they marked with? Oh yeah, 1 tick mark. Okay. All right, I'm gonna move on. I'll switch colors here to red. This time we're being asked if MA, so M to A, is congruent to TH. And I noticed that I went through 2 tick marks and 2 tick marks, so yes, those two sides are congruent. The reason, they're marked, and they had 2 ticks each. All right, moving on, MT and TM. So M to T is right there, and then T to M. Whoa, we just went basically on the exact same line. I'm gonna mark it with 3 tick marks just so we remember that. So yes, those guys are congruent, and the reasoning there is one of the new ones from today. That is your reflexive property. Anytime 2 triangles share a side, or you draw over the same side twice like we did there, that's going to be a reflexive property. All right, moving on. Angle H and angle A. So here is angle H, here is angle A. They are definitely congruent. Reason being, they are both right angles. Or we can say both 90 degrees, okay? All 90-degree angles are going to be congruent. Next one, I'm going to erase here so I get a clean slate for you guys. Angle MTH. I'm going to go from M down to T and out to H. So we're talking about this angle here. Is that congruent to angle TMA? So here's T to M to A. Are those congruent? Yes. And reason, they are both marked as 35 degrees. And then the last one here is angle HMT. HMT, so this angle here, I'm going to put 2 marks on it. Is that one congruent to angle ATM? A to T to M. So this one here. So the question is, are those guys congruent to one another? My answer for you is yes. Yes, they are congruent to one another, and that is because of the third angle theorem. Okay, so because angle H and angle A were congruent, and because these 35-degree angles were congruent, therefore those remaining angles had to be congruent. So I'm just going to write third angle theorem, abbreviate that way. All right, so like I said, the practice is a little bit different, but I think that it's enough the same that you will be just fine with it.